Hi, Andrina. Is that how you say it? And Andrina? I always do it poorly. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's Andrina.
Andrina. Andrina. Andrina. I'm gonna write down. All right.
I want to say maybe about 10% of people can pronounce it the first time around. So
Okay.
I do not get offended. It's okay.
Bless your heart.
Awesome. Any happy plan for the weekend for anybody? Exciting plans?
That's a good question. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
I don't have any very large plans. I'm prepping for the following week, which is my son's birthday.
Oh, that sounds fun. Well, happy birthday to your son.
Right, except that he didn't request it off, and I feel like I have failed his mother. That's like should be a national holiday, right? It should be your day, and yeah, he's like, it's just another day. I'm like, oh, no, it isn't.
That's so interesting when people, yeah, I feel like there's camps of people that are like birthday week, birthday like month,
Right,
and some people are like,
forever.
"Just
Yeah,
work."
he doesn't even. Yeah, I was so like, well, maybe your mom wants to hang out with you on that day.
Trevor's the same way.
Yeah,
I see people with like, you know, birthday shopping spree, and then they would have like a large shopping
yes.
like, and then I think I watched some of the videos on YouTube. They do the unboxing of the things that they buy. It was just like so like, well, cool, but
Good for you.
yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good plan. Amelia says her weekend plans include sleeping in. I would agree with that, Amelia. My 4-year-old won't allow that, but I would happily do that too.
Yeah. Hi,
But
Andy.
hello, everyone.
Hi, Jill.
Afternoon.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. So we're going to keep hanging out and let folks roll on in. I know there's a few others that we expect to still see. Is Scott coming today?
Don't know.
Oh, no? Okay. And then
He
I
is
was going to say,
working
maybe
today,
wait
but
for Scott.
we may have other meetings.
Understood. Ooh, little shout out for our wildfire resource page while we're waiting for the last of our folks to roll in here. This is an incredible resource page. Oops, if I spell it right. If you ever wonder, like I had a friend that said, hey, I smelled that this morning, but I didn't actually realize it was the fire. I thought my neighbor or this or that. And I was like, oh gosh, yes. So if you go on this link that I put in chat, you can click on the resources and see satellite imagery, and it'll give you a visual. That really helps people understand that there's this plume of smoke just kind of hanging out and sailing its way into the valley, and that's what we all smell.
Did anyone watch that special on Channel 18 last night about the Creek Fire?
No, but I have plans to watch it.
Yeah, I haven't watched either. I taped it, though. I haven't had a chance to watch it. It sounded like it was going to be very comprehensive.
I hope so. It was, yeah. I'm having the same feeling as the Creek Fire from last year, as the KNP Complex Fire this year, because that's where I grew up. I'm very familiar with that area down there.
Oh.
So recognizing that feeling that folks had this time last year for the Creek Fire. Okay, I see it as 3:03. Well, here's Brian. I was going to say I'm going to give it 2 more minutes and we'll get rolling at 3:05 if you're okay with that, Dr. Hopp. Cool.
Oops, I was muted. Yeah, that sounds good to me. I don't know if is Ed joining. Do you know Ed Flores from UC Merced? I talked to him like a couple of days ago. I think he's joining. I don't know if he's in yet.
I don't see him yet, but okay.
I'll give him a text message to see.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Janet. Hi, Brian. All the people that have rolled in. Happy Friday. There he is. You're good. You queued him up perfectly, Dr. Hop. Welcome.
Welcome. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Ed. I was going to shoot you a text, but
Sorry, I was a little late hopping off the last meeting.
Understood. That's why we're kind of giving it a couple minutes, let folks roll in, and we're going to start in about 1 more minute. Oh, right. All right. All right, 3:05 on my screen. Let's roll, shall we? Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Heinz with the Valley Air District, and I think we've all met before and pretty much know each other. Throw your hand up, though, if you need introductions. Dr. Ha is our speaker of the hour. We have talked with your colleague in the past, but it was very important, and the CSC was very eager to have some time to chat with you as well, and we appreciate all of your input and support of our project. Before I hand it off to you, though, I want to go ahead and let the city kind of take over and run with it. I do want to point out that the presentation we have today is in English. We absolutely are going to work on the Spanish translation, already are working on it, and we will distribute that. So it will be available very soon. It was just sort of the framework to get started, a reference point for the discussion today. And I don't see Scott, so I don't know if it's Andrew or Jill or Andrena, whoever wants to roll with it.
Maybe Jill or Andrena. We are making good progress, but I'll let them tell you guys where we are.
I can start with the truck portion of it, and then I'll hand it off to Andrina. She's been working mostly on the health assessment out of the three of us, but we have interviews set up for this coming up week for the truck reroute portion of it. We did receive 2 responses to our RFP. So we will be holding those consultant interviews next week, and we'll have panelists from the steering committee, from the city, and I think that's it. There's, how many panelists were there, Andrina? 7 or 8?
Yeah, we've got 8, and the Air District as well.
Air District, yes, sorry.
Mhm. And Braden from Fresno Cog will
From
be on
COG,
there too.
yes. So we will have discussions on that after the interviews and bring those recommendations back to the full board for approval.
Mhm. As far as the health assessment, we've met with UC Merced a couple of times, and we went over what we would like to see in the health assessment, along with the help of Dr. Curry, who also met with Dr. Ha. And she put together the scope in today's presentation, and she's here to present it to the rest of us.
okay, am I up? Or okay, sorry about that. I wasn't sure. Okay, so first off, thank you everybody for being here on this lovely Friday afternoon, and I'm very excited to be involved in this project. And so first of all, let me see if I could share my screen. Right, I should be able to, I think. Share. Can everyone see my screen on your side? Perfect. Okay. I think I met with a lot of you, but some of you I haven't met. So I'm just going to kind of introduce myself a little bit here. So I am an epidemiologist, or perinatal and environmental epidemiologist at UC Merced here. I currently lead the environmental and perinatal epidemiology work group here at UC Merced. And again, I'm very excited to be part of this health impact assessment in terms of air pollution in Fresno, California. So I'm gonna, I've worked with Dr. Curry, like Andrina was saying earlier, and we have addressed some of her comments in here. So today I'm just going to present very briefly the sort of the scope of work, leaving out some of the details for the sake of time here, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end. In terms of outline, I'm going to go through briefly the problem statement, the objective of this health impact assessment, the brief methods of what we're going to do, and then a timeline in terms of where things are expected to be done. Yeah, the literature consistently suggests that air pollution impacts pretty much every body system, and studies around the world have linked air pollution to health impact across the lifespan. So on the screen you see here, there are, for pregnancy up to childhood to adulthood, and even in the, for the elderly as well. And at the bottom of the screen or the bottom of the slide, you'll see the different sort of like common health outcomes that have been associated with high exposure to air pollution. And so here I have some of the findings from the most recent State of the Air report to 2020, and that shows that Fresno City is sort of on the top of the list in terms of air pollution exposure. For example, on the left here, we have short-term particle pollution. In the middle, year-round particle pollution, and on the right, ozone pollution. And as you can sort of see there, Fresno is consistently on the top of sort of, the list of these particles. And part of this is because we're in a very unique sort of geographical region with special sort of unique topography. Meanwhile, Fresno has higher rates of multiple health outcomes compared to the rest of the state. So you see here, for example, infant mortality rates in Fresno is higher than the rest of California here, as you see in the number per 1,000. Preterm birth, we also have higher proportion compared to the rest of the state. And going down the list, we see here that we kind of, are consistently having higher rates of different health outcomes across the lifespan compared to the rest of California here. Now, the biggest sort of, I would say, gap is that very few studies have evaluated the impact of air pollution in Fresno, California. And in fact, I'm not aware of any study at all. And while there are a lot of studies that evaluated impact in, for example, Los Angeles. And so there is a critical need for such assessment in Fresno. So the overarching aim of this health assessment is to assess the extent to which air pollution impacts the common health outcomes across the lifespan of Fresno in Fresno, California. The second objective is to calculate the excess number of cases that are attributable to air pollution in the city. In other words, say if we can or reduce a certain amount of air pollution, how much of these cases can we prevent? The third objective of this aim is to explore residents' health experience that are related to air pollution in the region. And when I mentioned health outcomes up here, I'm talking about health outcomes that are across the lifespan, like I kind of mentioned a little bit in a few slides ago, and I'll talk more about that in the following slides. So this health impact assessment is modeled after the World Health Organization's general principle of health risk assessment for air pollution. And so essentially, the impact assessment is divided into two main parts. The first is called, I would call it, just for the sake of clarity here, the population-based health risk assessment. And then the second part is going to be called the community health survey. So I'll walk us through briefly the first part first. So the population-based health risk assessment here. So the main goal of this part is to estimate the impact of common pollutants on health across the lifespan within the city of Fresno, and also to identify susceptible subpopulations. In other words, even at the same level of exposure, who are more sensitive or more vulnerable to the impact of air pollution. And so in terms of common pollutants, we'll be focusing on a few right here on the left, indicated in orange here. We'll focus on ozone and particulate matter, or fine particulate matter of less than 2.5 micron in diameter. And these pollutants are ubiquitous, as well as have been consistently suggested in the literature to be having negative health impact. We'll also focus on distance from highways as well as truck routes, because these are common sources of air pollution in the area. And then in terms of health outcomes, I previously mentioned that, health outcomes across the lifespan. And so I, throughout looking at the literature, through kind of, chatting, or throughout our conversation with Dr. Curry, there are 4 health outcomes that we are going to look at. And again, it ranges from, infant mortality very early in life, to preterm delivery also early in life, to childhood asthma representing pediatric population, and then adult cardiovascular event, of course, representing the adult as well as the elderly population. And so in order to address that aim, this population-based health risk assessment will link, or spatial temporally link, multiple source of large population-based data. And I'm going to briefly talk about that. So in terms of the pollutants and the distance from highways and truck route, we'll be obtaining these from the Air District data as well as Caltrans. So we'll have like a layer, if you want to call it that way, of air pollution and sort of like the highway network as well as truck route network. And we will spatially and temporally link this to infant mortality data, preterm delivery data that is provided here, as I denote here, by vital statistics from the California Department of Public Health. We'll also link it to childhood asthma and cardiovascular event data. And these are ER, or emergency department visits and hospitalization due to these outcomes. And these data are going to be obtained from the California Office of Healthcare Planning and Development, OSHPD. And then we'll also link these to the social environmental indicators from the environmental, or the Cal Environ Screen, the latest version 4.0. We'll also link that to the we'll also use the American Community Survey to obtain some additional sort of neighborhood indicators as well. So as you can imagine, once these data sets are linked based on zip code, and by the way, zip code is the smallest sort of geographical indicator that we could obtain from these different data sets here. But I think zip code is probably is sufficient based on the literature as well, sufficient to be a proxy for kind of, sort of residential exposure to air pollution. So you can imagine, after the linkages of these data sets, we have a very comprehensive data set that contains individual health information, from infant mortality, so like pregnancy outcomes, as well as childhood and adult health outcomes. And then we'll also have their information in terms of, like their exposure to different pollutants at various time during their life, basically during the study period. And I forgot to mention the study period, but I listed them here, like sort of like where the data sources are. So essentially around 2008 to 2018, 19-ish. There's variation here because the last date of data availability is different across different data sources. So without kind of going into too much detail here, but I wanted to kind of talk through the different types of questions that this assessment can answer. So for example, this very comprehensive data set can answer questions like, is exposure to higher pollution associated with higher risk of adverse health outcomes, and by how much? And then also, do people living closer to major roads or truck road have higher risk of these adverse health outcomes, and also by how much? We could also answer the question of, right, are there a subgroup of people who may be more vulnerable to the impact of air pollution? And if so, who and where are they? And then we could also estimate the number of cases of these different health outcomes that could be prevented if air pollution exposure were to be reduced. And we think that the answers to these questions are very critical and can be very helpful for policy decisions, as well as sort of like, community planning in general. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the impact assessment here is divided into two different sort of like parts, right? So I just briefly walked us through the very first part, the community-based health risk assessment. So now I'm going to move on and talk about the community health survey. And so, as you can imagine, this part, the first part, is based on basically large population-based data set, right? And so we're limited from the information that are available there. And so the second part of this, the community health survey, is trying to kind of further understand the residents' health experience that are relevant to air pollution exposure in the region. So things that, I'm going to talk about this a little more, but we can basically collect further information that are not available in the first part that I discussed. So in a nutshell, the community health survey is aiming to sample around 1,000 or at least 1,000 or more Fresno residents, and the survey will be administered by trained interviewers from our partnered community organization. And so some of the information that we're going to collect include the following. So the first is health outcomes. So, some of the health outcomes that are known to be potentially associated with air pollution exposure. We'll also collect information regarding social economic characteristics, people's knowledge and perception about air pollution, their needs, their concern, and potentially their lifestyle. And because air pollution is not just outdoor, it's also indoor as well, so we can collect information about that. And this comprehensive survey can also answer additional very important questions that might be very helpful for potentially intervention purposes, as well as support the results from the first part, right? So some of the questions that can be answered include, one, are there differences in outcomes and health outcomes among residents living closer or further from the proposed distribution center? That's one question we can answer. Right? Two, what environmental issues are our residents most concerned about? Three, how are residents' knowledge and perception about health risks related to air pollution in the region? And where do they get their information from? And I think this might have very important implication for potentially intervention purposes later on. And then fourth, what are the health needs among our residents, particularly those that are related to air pollution exposure? And lastly, what are residents doing to protect themselves against pollution exposure, right? Are they looking into sort of like, these different resources for air pollution? So do they look at it on a daily basis to inform their activities? So things like that, knowing that would be better, not better, but like will further help us in potentially future intervention efforts. So I just very quickly, briefly talked about the two the health impact assessment and specifically the two parts. And I think the very first part, and again, that's the part where we'll look at, we'll link multiple population-based data sets to answer questions related to how air pollution impact health in the whole population, right? And I think that the findings here will really provide population-based estimates that are very useful for health impact estimation, policy decisions, as well as community planning efforts. The second part of that, again, just as a reminder, it is the part where we're going to recruit at least 1,000 people in Fresno to kind of collect more further information regarding their experience related to air pollution in the area. And this part will further support policy decisions, planning, and intervention purpose later. So here I have a very sort of like a draft of the timeline that we're going to try to follow here. So we're now, I know that this is a little bit of an older timeline because I've started working on this, you know, I would say a few months back, a couple months back, but you know, I have here basically the different, I don't want to go into the detail, but like the different deliverables here. There are more details in the proposal itself, but there are going to be about 4 deliverable. The first one is going to be that health needs assessment survey, the survey that I talked about, which is really the second part of the assessment. And then the first deliverable is going to be about the impact of air pollution on adverse pregnancy outcomes, so infant mortality and preterm delivery. And then we'll have one more for childhood asthma, and then the other one is for cardiovascular event. And I have here sort of like the estimated completed or the completion deliverable date here. With the first one, the health survey around December 2022, the pregnancy outcomes, so the first health risk assessment, August of 2022, and then the childhood asthma paper or report is going to be around, I think it was, hold on, March of 2023, and then the last one would be June of 2023. So the expected, I think the expected sort of timeline is 18 months. But this, I think, also depends on how fast we can get the paperwork done for the data sets that I mentioned earlier, because those will need to go through the data owner in order to get the information. We already started on that, but as soon as like if we can get everything is finalized and we can you know, get started on it before the project start dates, even to make sure that we could get the data in time for the analyses. So I think that's really it in terms of the, you know, sort of like the project. And I'm happy to, of course, you know, take questions, comments, suggestion. And again, thank you for your time and for listening. And I'm again very excited to engage with the community and engage with all stakeholders regarding this very important topic in Fresno. So thank you for listening.
Oh, I think you're muted.
There we go. Sorry. I noticed there was a couple of people who came in a little later after Dr. Ha had started. Thank you, Dr. Ha. So as I mentioned, we wanted to meet with everybody and present what we believe is a great scope of work and get everybody's feedback on it. So we are able to move forward. And we would love to dedicate the rest of the meeting to hear from everybody and everybody's opinions and pointers on what we've seen so far for the proposal. Thank you.
It's quiet this Friday afternoon. I know you guys have questions.
Hello. Hello, this is Ivanka. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Ivanka.
Okay. Hello. Thank you so much for this presentation, Dr. Ha. I do want to ask you the one question of how do you see the truck reroute study playing out with the health analysis? So while you're well, over the 18 months, this is the process on the health impacts and the data. Will that be a consultation along with the folks that are the to be consultant of the truck reroute study, what is that level of communication that will be between the two? And I'm asking this question from the point of view when, say, a developer, they have to do their environmental impact studies to present to a city and to state what they do and don't think the impacts will be. And they write it according to CEQA, but to the best of the ability to make it appear that whatever that facility or project that's going to be brought in is not going to have a lot of impact, and recognize if it does. So at what point does all this information that you will be collecting become part of that, the other consultant that's doing the actual truck study?
Okay, I'm unmuted now, right? Thank you so much for that question. So I am not familiar, I'm not very familiar with the timeline of the truck reroute study, but again, I'm happy to engage and to engage with all, like the other team to make sure that our, like whatever we're doing will be I guess, will be helpful to the community. So, at this point, Andrina, I don't know I don't know the timeline for the other project at the back of my mind here.
I think maybe Sandy, what you're getting at is that we're going to look to the city and to this committee for guidance on that, right?
True. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. Thank you, Ivanka. And, we see like that we should be, looking at, documents that are relevant to the analysis. And so a public document, right, like an environmental impact review report, right? Those are important. So thank you for pointing that out, Ivanka.
So as of now, and I think Jill can correct me, or I think Andy's going to speak as well. I believe we're estimating that the truck study would take about 18 months. So we want that both the truck study and the health assessment go together at the same time, and work one off of the other, and have that communication between both groups.
I would say too, these type of studies help us to document the problems that
Hi,
we
it's
have
Lisa. I got to realize.
in Fresno and in our industrial area, in particular, West Fresno, and help us to, I don't know, look for solutions to solve the problems. We use these type of studies whenever we apply for grants to improve air quality or to make either road improvements or improvements to a certain industry. We need to document the problems we have to further strengthen our position to get grants and bring money into the region to try to solve these problems. So, will it exactly change the truck route study? Maybe not tomorrow, but over time, it will make a huge difference.
Hi, it's Lisa. I have a couple of questions. As the next 18 months go forward, will this health study also take in the long, say, for example, if there was a new Amazon warehouse that goes in, in South Fresno, will your study also land use perspective? And then the other question I have is, I'm a high-risk heart patient, everybody knows that. And what sort of survey are you going to be doing for asthma in heart patients? Because currently, right now, my cardiac doctor has me on a 2-week kind of little harness succubus thing on my chest, monitoring my heartbeats for 2 weeks. How deep are you going to go into the cardiology part and the asthma part as far as tracking, real-time, real-life situations?
Just real quick, Lisa, I believe you had 2 questions. The first one was really hard to hear. There was you cut out a lot, but I think Dr. Ha can answer possibly that second part. Did you get that, Dr. Ha?
Yeah, so right,
The
thank you.
first question, the first question was, are you going to take in the ever-evolving land use situation in Southwest Fresno, or not Southeast Fresno, into account to be another Amazon or Ulta big warehouse for numbers?
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think the sound was a little bit sort of like choppy, but I think I'm hearing the first part of the question is are we going to take into account land use? Is that correct? And then the second point is how detailed are we going to get into the cardiovascular and asthma health outcomes? So for the first question, correct me if I didn't hear it correctly. For the first question about land use, so the air pollution estimates that we're going to use is going to be from the I've previously worked with somebody from the air district to obtain data from for my previous study. So I'm going to continue the collaboration or the partnership with them. And so from my understanding is that the air pollution estimate here, so these are just like from the estimates that are provided by the air district. I know that they want, it goes through some statistical modeling that takes into account like photochemical properties of the pollutants and like sort of like, meteorology, like weather pattern. But in terms of the land used of the, in the area, given the scope of the study and the time that we're given, I'm not sure if we can actually like directly incorporate that in the study. So that's the first. And then the second is how detailed are we going to be able to incorporate the detail of the different health outcomes? So for the first part, the sort of like the population-based health assessment, that is using medical records from these patients. And so we will have some detail, but then in the second part, the community survey, and because it is a it's given, right, again, the scope of the study, it's a small survey. I'm not certain in terms of how details in terms of like the daily or like the daily details of these health outcomes. But I think, having the sort of like broader like assessment of the outcome is still useful for, identifying potentially, right, how much is air pollution contributing to cardiovascular disease outcome in general. So I don't know if that addressed your question, Lisa. And I acknowledge that there are some parts I didn't hear too well.
I don't see Lisa on here anymore. Okay, maybe she'll jump back on. I see Bill Jensen has his hand raised if you'd like to unmute and provide your comments.
Yes, I just have a kind of a general question. Will the Dr. Hall, will the study have the ability to isolate some of the outside environmental factors that could be changing? For example, like right now we have the wildfires that are having an effect everywhere, but could they be more or less of an effect throughout the truck route area? And perhaps will there be any means to evaluate, as now we're beginning to start the transition from the emissions the trucks are now putting out to where we're going to be approaching more zero emission and near zero emission trucks and vehicles that may be using these truck routes. So I'm just curious if there's going to be any means to evaluate some of these factors that are affected and changed. For example, we're in the valley, depending on the atmospheric situation of high and low pressure and all this sort of thing. Will any of these factors that have a tendency to change have an effect on your study? Most particularly with right now, we're beginning the change from the emission standards from 2010 vehicles to 2025, where a certain percentage of the heavy duty vehicles will be transitioning to electric or hydrogen or near zero CNG or whatever. So I was just curious if there's going to be a way to calculate some of these outside effects.
So sort of like two parts. So the first part is like whether sort of like, meteorology will impact the study. So like these different sort of like, changing environmental factor that also may, right, like impact the study result. So the plan is actually to take into account like weather meteorology in general, so that, any like association or any impact that we see between air pollution and these health outcomes are actually like the air pollution, not because of, say, for example, like high temperature or something like that. In terms of like the more sort of like, I don't know if the historical is the right word, but like the contextual changes, like changing to policy regarding emission and all that. I mean, the exposure that we're going to use is basically like sort of like a measurement of ozone and PM 2.5, and so unfortunately, it is not it's not easy to kind of be able to tell, okay, so like where is this PM 2.5 will comes from, and so that part, I don't know if that's like within the scope of the study, although that would be something. It's that's an important question. I don't know if that answers the question, or did I?
Yes, and that is an important question, and
Yeah.
I'm curious if that would be a contributing factor, at least on the truck route portion, if that's the most serious contributing factor, or could it be other sources impacting it? For example, land use or whatever. This is kind of a truck route study. So, is there a way to kind of separate some of the? We I think all agree that these are very serious, problems. But I was curious if there's going to be a means to kind of separate the sources, because in a given area, it could be caused from the emissions from the trucks, cars. It could be the emissions generated by industry or the weather, or like right now the wildfires. So I honestly believe the wildfires are probably overwhelming most all the other pollutant factors that we have at this point in time. And I was just curious if there's going to be a means to separate some of these things, so that we're just not all going to blame land use, or we're just not going to all blame the truck routes, or the type of vehicles, or the size of the vehicles, or the powertrains of the vehicles, and the weather factors, and all this sort of thing. I was just curious how detailed your study might be, to be able to give us a way to make a long-term evaluation as things are changing.
Yeah. So like in terms of, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is like, it's very difficult to kind of like tease out apart where the 2.5 or the ozone is coming from, because like we have these, like you said, multiple sources that are contributing. However, one of the questions I guess like the small part of the research is like, one of that is like actually comparing health outcomes between people who live near traffic or who live near a truck route to the people who live further. And I think will get to some of the question that you're getting. And so this part is trying to kind of like, zone in onto potentially traffic as one source, or the truck route as another, so I think that it's getting to where your question is. So like by comparing people who live closer to a certain source compared to those who live a little further. It gets a little bit to that, but then like again, like teasing apart what proportion of PM 2.5 comes from, say, wildfire, what proportion comes from traffic, what proportion comes from like different emitter. That I think is like way beyond the scope of what we can do of this for this assessment. Does that, hopefully that that addresses some of your question, Bill?
Yes, it does. And, basically, if there's a way to solve the problem accurately, because, if this is going to take a year or two to get the study completed, and then by that time, maybe there's a certain percentage of the trucks that you evaluated today that are no longer emitting, NOx and all these other pollutants, because they've been changed over to electric. If there was a way to, do a calculation, based on environmental factors such as the zero emission trucks to see where we're at, at a given time, 2 years from now or whenever, depending on how much longer after your study that the city's portion takes, by the time they do the actual traffic and so forth, and, with global warming and all these other factors that could be changing from the way they are now in 2 years, I'm just curious if there was going to be a means to, evaluate some of these changing potential factors. If we don't have wildfires in 2 years, well, then that's going to solve a lot of the problems, but I kind of doubt that that's going to happen, without. So I was just kind of curious about, some of the effects that do change as time goes on. If there's a way to separate some of those to reevaluate as, land use changes, as the truck routes. In other words, if we just change a few truck routes, what changes is it going to make in the community? What's going to be the best for the community long term? I think that's what everybody here is trying to determine. I'm just thinking with, the goal is to go from the emissions that the trucks put out today to zero emissions, in a matter of 5 years or 10 years or whatever. The study might be obsolete based on, the truck usage at that time, because this is, this particular committee, I think is goal is to determine the truck routes, if they need to be changed or how they need to be changed and so forth. So there's other factors that would affect the health and so forth of the community besides the trucks. But since we're trying to evaluate the truck routes, is there a way to separate some of these causes, so that we make sure and solve the problem, Do you understand? But I think you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things
It's a difficult problem.
It is a difficult problem, a very important problem to right. But so I think, so one of the things that we're going to calculate for, in this proposal is basically like if we can eliminate this much pollution, right? Like how much health outcomes or how many health outcomes can we prevent? And so like, I think for the future then, like if we want to project it into the future, we could actually use that and say, if, we put in a truck route somewhere, for example, right? And we know that it probably will increase the pollution level by this much, then you could actually project like how many more cases of asthma can we expect, that kind of thing. I don't know if that gets to where you're trying to get, Bill, because I think that has important implication for planning purposes.
Right. As long as there's a means to separate some of these cause and effect things, whether it's the wildfire part of it, or it's the truck part of it, or the farming part of it, or the manufacturing or whatever. If there's a way to separate some of these contributing factors, it might be easier to, at the end of the day, to make some decisions, not only on the truck route portion, but maybe there's land planning and some of these other factors that this study could be helpful. in the future. If, if there's a way to separate some of the, particularly the wildfire part of it, that's got to be a big effect. And then also, we're in a valley where I'm sure we get a certain amount of pollution that because of weather factors that are brought into the area that could have an effect. And, I'm just very naive or not up on, a lot of the stuff that, your expertise is in. So I just appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, there are sort of like, I think, given like the time that we have, I don't know if it's feasible to be able to actually tease apart again, like, what you're asking as in like, where does the pollutant comes from? But that might be something for, future projects. If, yeah, but certainly,
Mainly is since this is a truck reroute committee, is if you could focus on the truck pollution portion of it,
Mhm.
based on the purpose of this particular committee, I think would be an important factor. In other words, like if there's so many trucks that are 2010, we know what the pollution levels that they're putting out. So if we eliminate half of those trucks and convert them to zero emissions, we might be able to make future recommendations. Like maybe the actual pathway of a given street, could stay the same if we only required zero emission trucks, for example, versus the emission levels that the 2010 trucks are putting out now. So, based on a particular street path, if we knew some of these factors and how much they contributed, we could isolate. Maybe we could just say, okay, for example, if you're Amazon and you're going to have 100 trucks a day that are making an X amount of pollution to the community, maybe you need to change those 100 trucks to zero emissions and eliminate this much of the pollution problem. So I was just suggesting if there's some means, and I'm not trying to come up with a solution, but if there was a way to calculate so that as we take away some of the pollution factors, that we could calculate what we could do just by making, it may not, we have certain physical boundaries, based on where everything's located. So we do need, streets to get us from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And if it's, for example, going to reduce the health benefits, by having so many trucks travel that, well, maybe we could also eliminate those factors by changing those trucks to that pollute less. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. That's very important.
Hi, it's Lisa again. I'm sorry. I in the middle of her answer, I got bumped off and didn't get to hear it.
Oh yeah, sorry, Lisa. Yeah, we realized that you were off when you were when I was done. So let me try to remember. So you had two questions. One was how detailed are we going to obtain the information regarding sort of like the different health outcomes. I was saying there are two parts of the assessment. The first part is using medical records. So we do have some details regarding sort of like their the participants sort of like I guess like generally their outcomes, like detail about their outcomes. But then in the second part with the survey, given the scope of it, I'm not sure how far we could go in terms of the clinical aspect of the outcomes. But I think regardless of that, being able to sort of like estimate the impact of air pollution on these outcome in general is also very useful for like planning and right like policy decisions. can't remember quite what the first part of the question was.
I
Can you remind me?
I actually think I have somebody that you can talk to at UCFS
Yeah.
over in cardiology that will actually Minnesota. I'm getting all sorts of strange phone calls today, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have some connections over at the cardiology office over at UCSF, and they handle a lot of folks on the lower economic scale, and also a lot of people in downtown Fresno. So within the footprint of 617, I think that might be helpful for you. Because if you can't find the person, you can at least find the doctor. Also, to the other question I had was about how does land use impact the study as more construction comes on board? For example, if there was a additional Amazon built, how would that impact your analysis?
So the air pollution exposure that we will use will come from the air district. And so the air pollution level that's going to be estimated comes from like sort of like it accounts for multiple sources, including sort of like emission. It comes from, like photochemical interaction between chemicals and meteorology, sort of like weather in general. So I'm not, like.
Will you be doing you'll do the current numbers, will you be doing a 10 and 20 year projection? And also too, how are you going to handle 99?
So, thank you. That's a good point. So one of the objective, one of the question that we're going to answer is, so like whether people who live closer to major road like highways have like, additional risk with these different health outcomes. So that's probably going to go into that sort of like sub objective. Highway 99 will fall into sort of like the major highway.
Especially since, they're right now in certain portions of the 99 in the valley, it's only 2 lanes. They're doing 3 lanes through the most urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
Their ultimate build out is a 4 lane. So that may be 20 years. Don't know. So will you be projecting numbers out that far?
So like in terms of like streets changing, changes like this, I don't think we will have like the actual data to be able to predict, right? But what I was saying earlier, we could predict in terms of like, so if the air pollution level rises by a certain amount, right? Like then how much more cases are we going to are we going to expect? That is something that we could do. But in terms of like specific changes, like adding a different a different site of something or something like that, I don't know if we have the data that will allow us to be able to predict that. I don't know if that
Well, this is very much in the realm of the impact that humans have on their environment, right? So I mean, it'd be ideal if we could look into the future and know what sorts of developments are going to be planned. But 5 years ago, we probably wouldn't have imagined the developments happening right now. So the best we could do is just, as you're saying, Sandy, right? Is
no, I actually think you could have.
This is Ivanka.
I
Can you
think
hear me?
actually that you could look at the map of Southeast Fresno.
I think we're losing Lisa. Yes, we could hear you, Ivanka.
I think you could look at what currently is what's coming through and actually project out numbers. I think you could actually do it. Ivanka.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I don't have that hand raise feature that I can see. But The other question I had, and maybe this is someone from the Air District, when Dr. Hall, you're stating that you're using the data from the Air District, are we referring to, most importantly, the air monitors that we've placed from this program in those areas? Or is it more than that information, meaning all the information that we've brought into the whole 617 program as far as the main emitters, where the location of the larger industry as well? And that's the main question. And then the other question, I get that you may not be able to decipher where PM 2.5 is actually coming from. And I'm okay with that, because the main thing is we already know this whole community within the 617 is already overburdened. So the focus should be on being able to look at those the overburdened areas that are already high in 2.5 and coming up with those solutions, like you stated in a hypothetical of if we reduce truck reroutes. Because trucks, I know Bill is talking about projecting how much zero emissions would decrease the impact, but that's not the only impact that trucks have on the community. And so even if you replace with zero emission trucks, you're still going to have impact from all the other parts of the infrastructure that is impacted in South Central Fresno, which is this boundary. So my main question, and like I said, I don't know if Jessica or Dr. Hall who would answer that, but are we referring to data from the Air District as the data that we haven't really used yet, that we are collecting from the monitors? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted it. Okay, so I can start, and then Jessica, you can fill me in too. So what when I refer to the Air District data, it's not just the data from the air monitor, like the direct data from the air monitors, but this is rather coming from a model that takes into account like meteorology, it takes into account emission, it takes into account sort of like the interaction of the chemicals in the air as well. So in in a nutshell, it's a bit more how do I say, accurate in that sense, because you can imagine people are not living next to a monitor, right? Like not everyone lives near a monitor. And so this is kind of the model that the data that will be using is, we'll use a model that improves sort of like the estimation of the air pollution concentration at any given point in time. The other part that you were mentioning about specific communities, definitely that is something that that's one of the center part of the objective, is really to kind of identify populations who may be more vulnerable to the impact of air pollution, even at the same level of exposure. So so definitely that's something that we look into.
And to your question, Ivanka, yes. I mean, the plan here would be to use anything and everything available to inform this study, including the new monitoring from the AB 617 effort.
Yeah.
And real quick time check, we are over.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? It's a good conversation. So I would like to just, reach out for kind of any extra or like late questions, and then sort of do a wrap up and any final comments coming from the city. Oh, Lisa.
Well, I just want to thank UC Merced folks. Thank you for the Gantt chart. Seriously, I like to see that sort of linear thinking of what's going to be done when. Please keep it coming. And I look forward to, our open-ended conversations with you regarding this issue in the study. And if you need any help, please reach out to me and the others on the committee, because we all know somebody. It's like 6 degrees of taco and carne asada in this town. So, please feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. We'll keep open conversation.
And just checking anything from Isabel or Estela.
No, está bien.
No, everything's good.
Thank you.
Por ahora no tengo ninguna hasta ahorita.
Stella says right now she doesn't have any questions.
Awesome. I too want to thank you, Dr. Ha, for your time. Very, very, very happy to have your insight on this process, and thankful for the city support too. My colleagues at the city, do you have any parting thoughts for us?
I don't know that we have. We're excited to get started. Really feel like we lucked out in getting Dr. Ha and UC Merced on board. I think they're just very well qualified. Really excited to get started on the project.
Couldn't agree more. Well, it's quiet, everyone. I think we're wrapping up and done. Thank you so much for your time today. Dr. Ha, thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. I know it's a
Thank
Friday
you,
afternoon, and thank you so much for the input, the suggestion, and everything, and the questions. And so we really look forward to work with you all on this.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Ha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Flores.
Gracias.
Thank you.
And Dr. Flores, thank you.
Buenas noches.
Adiós.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.